Thanks, boys, for jumping on. Should be a great round table. We've got Angus Bradley, K. Khrys Speed. I just call you K. But anyway, Cian. We should be able to get through and rip through a bunch of topics. We'll get started with some sales things. I think sales is an interesting concept for a lot of coaches because I feel like coaches are notoriously poor. And my first few years were notoriously povo when I was owning my own gym. I really struggled to understand or like leverage certain things in my business. And I think just being a better coach ultimately led me to selling more anyway, not necessarily my improved business skills. So I'm interested to chat with you guys, what you guys think. Angus, you can kind of chime in first because you had an interesting post you did recently. I feel like every now and again you like rip out the filing cabinet and you like pull out the sales one. And so
no, that's exactly what it is. I'm just like, there's about 4 or 5 people. I'm like, when's that comment coming in? It was someone different this time, but they're all singing or marching to the beat of the same tune, whatever the fuck people say. Oops, bit of foul language to start this off. I think my issue with these people is like all the sales coaches, they just think they're the heroes of the industry. They're like, they always bring it back to, because my whole thing is like, fuck your sales course in the first 5 years. Just focus on the craft. Like you should be eating shit for the first 5 years. And then all these sales coaches come in, they're like, well, why do you think the industry has such a fucking high turnover rate? And it's like, well, I think there's an abundance of sales courses. I think there's an abundance of money-hungry cunts in this industry. I think the turnover is largely because people are shit at the craft. And there's such a low barrier to entry in our field and inconsistencies as far as standard of practice and things like that. And the reason we have to get so good at selling as well is because there is just such a lack of distrust in our industry. And I think that's proven in the fact that we say things like, your body is a business card, like, oh, would you go to a personal trainer that doesn't actually fit? As much as I roast out of shape, unathletic trainers and stuff like that, I think a sign of competency is in an industry like, when you go to a mechanic, you don't need to see him drive a car. It's because we have trust in the practices of mechanics and it's like a really well-established field. Same like everyone jokes about overweight doctors, but reality is you can go to an overweight doctor and assume a certain standard of care, and those standards just aren't there in our industry. So I know I just pivoted around a little bit, and that wasn't really about sales at the end. But yeah, I think we've just like, so many people just see sales as like the biggest roadblock for our industry progressing forward as far as standards for trainers. I'm like, that actually makes me sick. Because I think, again, like what people are trying to do is just learn how to market a shitty product better rather than just improving the shitty product. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's some decent trainers out there who are just so socially inept that they fail, but this is not as normal of a thing as what these sales coaches made out. Like most passionate coaches who are in it for the right reasons will make it at the end of the day. That's my personal belief. I have zero data to back it up other than my own career.
Well, everyone has the same Canva template, so it's not helping.
I think the thing I hated is like when your PT gets some insecure person who's already insecure, just set foot in the gym and just corners them in a room, and the whole overcoming objection thing. I just find that scummy. But apparently that could have something to do with my own personal values. So, but then one thing I will say, because I probably seem like a little bit of a hypocrite, like I like marketing because that's less aggressive and it's less direct. And again, this is probably personal values coming into it a lot. But yeah, I would rather just like get better at the marketing side of things, which I view as like indirect sales and just crop dusting your message out there. I think that's sort of the way to go for me because I do want nice things and I do want to own a house eventually.
That's something you do really well, Khrys, is just consistently like help people online.
I think that's kind of like what Angus was saying about like not marketing a shit product. I can't remember who told me about that early on, but it's like it was drilled into you to like a sports system as well. I'm sure Cian's probably had the same thing. It's like don't tell people how good you are, just like actually do it consistently and people will eventually notice. And I think that's the whole thing. Like some of the leads that I've had, and I always joke and say that a lot of the women that we get on board, either that I give to some of the rowing coaches or I take, they'll see like a post that helps them. It will be like something that I've posted recently, like getting a better start position or fixing your overhead position snatches. They'll use it, message, say, mate, that was great, that was so helpful. And then literally all I'll say is, I'm so glad it was helpful. And let me know, let me know what you think of like any of the content. They go, can I just pay for coaching? Whereas the guys, it will be they're just like kind of like sneaking around looking through the weeds for like 5 years. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I've been following you for a while. It's like, I know for a fact I met you like 5 years ago. I'm just wondering, do you do online coaching?
At least 5
and
years.
They pretend they pretend like they've never seen the link that you've put in your bio, being like, look, you can get me for online coaching, but it does take a while. But I think people don't realize that even if you put out genuinely helpful content, people see that you're evolving. They can see the people you coach, and you make it readily available. They can just go click on the link and look at what you have. There's some people who will look at that link for a good year or two, and then eventually they'll go, you know what? I can see how consistent this service is. I'm just going to jump on it. And I think all of the sales stuff that Angus is on about, there's a few PTs, coaches who I'm obviously not going to name because that's just mean, who have a particular marketing coach or coaches who show them how to do it. And it's always part and parcel like this. They'll message you like, oh, hey mate, really love your content, really love your training. Just wondering, like, how's training going at the moment? And then I'll be like, oh yeah, just wondering, do you want any help with this stuff? Oh, well, yeah, like let's talk about you buying my coaching service. And it's like, but you can literally see the message coming from a mile off. And I don't think those people realize that you might get 2, 3, 4 people off of that strategy, but there's 50, 60 other people who've all gone and said, dude, this guy.
What kind of NPC gets coached like that?
Do you know what I mean? But there's some people who will not be able to overcome and object to it because they feel awkward. They'll get the service, but then like, so there's I say it's a really,
in DMs, you're not even there face to face.
Yeah, and there's a guy that's used this. There's a guy that's used this marketing technique where he's paid other people, not people that he gets coached, but paid other people to go and say, "Oh, like I've been making great progress. Hey, my coach might be able to help you as well. You should go check him out." As a means of getting around that kind of I've not sober lotion. Of moving around that objection point, because people are now seeing it a mile off, where they'll get a DM and they'll go, "I'm not talking to that bloke because I can tell this is going to be a sales message." So then they do it by getting someone else to message them. So it's like, I just think if you actually produce a good product, you actually have patience, and you have the expectation that you're not going to be great straight away a lot of the time set for you, you'll be fine. Because all the advertisement over here for PTs is, hey, get qualified in a weekend, control your own schedule, work flexible hours, earn 100 grand a year, and, you know, get working straight away. But it's like, the reality is it should say, eat shit, don't earn much for about 3 to 5 years. If you stick it out and you're good, by the 4th or 5th year, you'll then actually be able to control your own schedule and turn away clients you don't want and maybe hire 1 or 2 other people, which is good. But it takes 4 or 5 years, like any other business. Like most businesses, like if you opened a coffee shop, you'd probably not expect to make that much money on it in the first couple of years. Do you know what I mean? Or a restaurant, you probably won't make that much the first couple of years, unless you make it big, like you went into Forex or you went into, you know, cryptocurrency when it started to boom. Do you know what I mean? Like the typical businesses, it takes years to gain traction. So you got to treat it the same way. You have to post and produce useful content for years. And then eventually people will go, well, all these other PTs have come and gone, but you haven't, and your content's getting better and your information's getting better. And whenever I go on your Instagram profile, there's like little ants across the storyboard because there's just loads of clients who are really happy with the service posting you, you've reposted them. Like there's very little else you need as an independent coach apart from that to actually make a decent business. If you're looking to scale up and have like 10, 15 other coaches and a gym, that's a bit different. But for marketing for an individual coach, you just need to show you know what you're doing and look professional. You don't need.
How many leads do you need? If you're just running a one-man show, like how many clients are you burning that you genuinely need? Well, Jesus Christ. Like, what are the numbers, boys? Like, how many clients are you losing on a regular basis?
I feel like if we get like a couple of leads,
I could get
a week,
like, give
or
me
like
one good lead a month.
Yeah,
one good lead a month. My books will be overflowing. I'll be teeing my mates up with clients. Dude, 1 lead a month. I'd be teeing my fucking mum up with online training clients.
Oh, mate, that's the thing. Like,
Jesus.
Yeah, like we live, like we.
That's actually encouraged, though. That whole strategy of cold DM, or not cold DMs, like, oh, how's your training going? There are scripts for DMs with that in programs that are quote unquote well respected. And I've done one. I paid $6,000 for an 8-week mentorship that was meant to be highly individualized. I did this after doing one of their earlier courses that was a lot cheaper and gave me so much more value than the cost of it. It probably gave me $10,000 worth of value. But then I was like, oh, well, it's more of a risk not to do this one because this is their new flagship one. And their last one was so unbelievably valuable. But it was literally here's a copy and paste thing you're going to do. You're going to design a signature program. It's going to be a group program, exactly like the group program I was in. It was a fucking Facebook group for 8 weeks. I was out within a week. I was like, fuck this. And it was scary, the level of incompetence in that group. The questions are mind-boggling that go in about training or nutrition or whatever. I'm like, no wonder you need to leverage sales so much. It's because you're such a fucking shit coach. But that's what it is. It's, you get these insecure coaches and they're feeding on that insecurity, and then you feel pressured into it because they have all this objection handling training, in air quotes. And yeah, you're just kind of backed into a corner, and then before you know it, you've paid $6,000 for an 8-week group course that's completely templated, and you're like, oh wow, this is a piece of shit. And the first piece of advice, get in shape and do a photo shoot. I was like, ugh. For everybody, doesn't matter what it was. There were some good people in the program, but like, it was 1 in 100 might be good. I don't know. There was not 100 people in it. There was like 20 people in it. I'm like, this is horrendous.
Even the term overcoming objections is fucked up. Like, it's like, oh, I don't want this service. Oh, no, but you do need this service. You do need me. You do need help with this. And it's like, yeah, I think what Angus was talking
where's
about.
the respect for personal sovereignty?
Yeah,
like,
getting them in a room.
Like, I know what you need better than you do, and I'm going to explain it to you, you dumb cunt. It's like, Jesus Christ.
You really can only those big. It's like those really big fitness firsts. Those other kind of like really huge gyms where people are just coming in and they did no research. They're just walking in. They have absolutely no idea. Probably really, I don't know. They want some help, and maybe you're going to get some people like that just off pressuring them into buying nutrition services and signing up to heaps of PTs up front. But for most people, there's a lot of choice out there, and they're happy to shop around, and they'll look at your page and decide. There was a client I referred to, like for nutrition services, and they just look at their Instagram. No, why is there Canva templated posts everywhere? Why is there, like, I don't see this person's original ideas. I don't see what they like to communicate with. Like, those things are what people's looking for, or what they're interested in. They're not, and they don't just want to be sold shit every fucking post. I don't know. It's quite interesting. And the cold DMs, I just don't get at all.
I think it goes back to what Angus said at the start about the state of the industry, though. I think that's the number one thing, is the state of the industry. I genuinely can't think of someone else I would refer someone to in my area. I can't. I cannot coach coaches or physiotherapists. And I'm like, I don't know if I can actually refer people to you because of what I've seen from you as a trainee, but then also when I see you post on socials, I'm like, that is absolutely horrendous. You thought that was a good idea to post? I just don't understand.
I think as well, like 90% of the trainers who are absolutely shameless about the sales process and genuinely think they're saving the world, it's because they can't imagine anything worse on the planet than being slightly out of shape. Like, we're in a pretty fat-phobic society, and I think that plays into it a big part as well.
We'll transition out of sales and out of content creation, because I feel like we're definitely done with those concepts. Those coaches don't really have much place in our strength and conditioning models. So before we get cancelled, they can't cancel us anyway. We'll talk about plyometrics, because that's something that the industry has definitely gravitated towards. Matt's done a really good job of getting people. So many more people have started to do Plyos because of his model, and I think that's awesome. So I think another thing Angus mentioned a couple of days ago was how bullish everyone is on warm-ups, and how warm-ups were just like, no, just come in and lift the bar. And now we're starting to see people integrate some skills and try and get clients to explore different movement options before they're getting into more highly skilled movements. And even just like potentially changing the way they look at the microcycle design process, and not just be like A1 squat. Maybe they're thinking about how they can integrate some additional volume or additional skills before you're getting started. And Plyos are some of the ways people are doing that. So, Khrys, I think you do this quite well, how you kind of get your athletes to explore different ranges. whether it's like using a medicine ball. Like I like those in and out leaps in those deeper ranges. I think deep tier has a really good place in the warm up, but then it can also be really effective with some of those contrasts where you've done like those, like you start off one leg, that's like a skater bound into a sprint, those kinds of movements. Like just complexes like that can be so fun before you're getting into training.
Yeah, I think it's just it's an easy way to be able to get someone to do something that's like, it's a little bit more challenging to get them to move a bit faster, because with weightlifting, I think so many people end up like they end up like nerfing themselves with the lifts because they think so much about what they're doing, so they almost freeze a little bit, so they don't know how to actually move fast and just solve the task by just go as fast as you can and try and maintain some degree of like relaxation. And with the pliers and stuff as well, it's really low hanging fruit, because some people I think like a arbitrary measurement that I've tried to use is you should be able to do like, the low ceiling squat jumps, like just jumping up and down the spot in a squat. You should be able to do like 50 of those and you should be fine. Whereas we've got like, especially some of the young uni lads who just think it's about strength, squat strength. Like genuinely, some of them do 10 and they're like, I need to rest in between. It's like, no, you need to do 20, and you need to be able to genuinely do that stuff, because it's making you like, apart from I remember Ash Grossman brought up a valid point, like for hypertrophy, it's probably not the best thing to do, because you're teaching your body how to be able to solve a movement problem in an explosive manner, not having to contract for that long. Do you know what I mean? So you're getting contract relax really quick. So that might not lend itself well to that mechanism, but that's kind of like a little bit of an arbitrary argument. But I think it's like, they're so low cost in terms of how much energy it takes you. You don't really have to warm up for them if you go from light tier to deep tier, or if you just start off in deep tier doing low ceiling. It makes you more explosive and it's fun. Why would you not? It's almost like, for me, it's like, why would you not do them? Just do some of them. You might as well. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's a case of I've always had athletes jump, but Matt's made it a lot easier to give you so many more variations to work people through. So you can make like, low ceiling extensive plyo circuit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can make all these variations, give them to people. And we've got a lot of guys who train at gym boxes, like a Farringdon gym box and what's the other one? Elephant Castle gym box. So my dream is basically to have it where there's loads of weightlifters on the turf doing weird, super difficult, unsettling looking plyos just down the turf. And when people come in, it's like, they train with Khrys, because that's already happened. Like some people doing like mad jumps or broad jumps of weight, and someone will ask, do you train with Khrys? And it's like, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, you jump quite well. So that's the reputation I want people to have. It's like, you make explosive people who lift well, not just like you can lift well, but then you move like a cinder block the rest of the time you're training. Do you know what I mean? Like you're lifting for fun, so the fun of lifting shouldn't take away from everything else that you're able to do without the bar in your hands.
I much the same as what Khrys said. Like, I always knew that there was a lot of value in plyometric, especially just for field sports athletes in general. But then, especially with Matt's tiered system, just having, because my feelings about plyometrics, about why I didn't make them that big of a part of my programming, is because I always had fears about scaling them and the load management aspect of it, and just adequate regressions and progressions. I could never get anyone looking good jumping on one leg unless they came to me being already a good one leg jumper and those sorts of qualities. So as far as just being able to scale plyos, the load management component of it, but then as well, just finding options where we can introduce these concepts into athletes that we might not stereotypically have pegged as people who would benefit a lot from plyometrics, but there's been just huge upsides just in terms of like joint health and things like that. And I know like people say like there's no exercises for joint health, but I do think one of the concepts I like to employ and bet on for overall joint health is just like a variety of stimuli, like exposing all of these joints to a variety of stresses. And even in weightlifting, like as much as we have some relatively fast movements, it's all a lot of like real similar speed sort of stuff, where it's like it's plyometrics and isometric. And then you've got that regular strength training, which sits right in the middle. And I think that that's a nice sort of exposure of a variety of forces to these joint and all these connective tissues to handle. And the plyometric training has been a big part of that. And again, like I know a powerlifter typically, like, what's the benefit there of extensive plyometrics or some deep tier plyometrics? Like, man, it's like, if that's something that can contribute to like knee health, for example, or something like so many strength sports athletes, just like little niggles and stuff like that. If you can solve a few, and I know they can be complicated, but if you can just have a few strategies that solve a few of those problems semi-reliably for these athletes, it can just have huge, tremendous upsides while not introducing much risk to the program. Because again, like, what's the threat to the system? I'm always looking at things through this anti-fragile lens. Like, what's the potential threat to the system with these plyos? Like maybe if you're doing heaps of ping tier stuff with a big chunky powerlifter, absolutely introducing a threat to the system, but just a sprinkling or a salt and peppering of some deep tier and some extensive stuff, tremendous upside and very low risk. And that's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for good deals in my programming. That's a hell of a deal. And then obviously for my actual people who need to do athlete shit, it goes without saying. It's just enhanced the hell out of that. Like so much more confidence. I can make people into better looking athletes now with this system, I believe, because there's nothing that makes you look like a more proficient athlete than just chaining together some good hops. One of the things.
Pretty much what those two have already said. They've kind of covered it. I'll try to like pepper them in across a program, and then try to find complementary exercises for them. Of late, a lot of it's been kind of band accelerated stuff, but I've noticed that things like the split clean, split snatches work really, really well with providing a reference frame for whipping that foot into the ground. You spoke before we started recording, Brandon, that you found it difficult at the start to kind of pick your toes up and actually land with a flat foot. And I think that's something the Olympic lifts really give us as a nice reference frame. Sent a video to Matt before this. It was like, just tell me this isn't a benefit of Olympic weightlifting, where we're so used to landing with a full foot that it's much easier for us to do. I started doing light and deep tier ones with a field sport team at the start of the year, and at the start everybody just was so afraid to land with a full foot. It was on the tip of their toes nearly all the time. But I said it didn't look like it was really improving all that much. I was like, let's just progress and see what happens. It's like it just clicked the switch or flipped the switch, and they all seemed to get it. And I was like, this is astounding, the level of progression here. I couldn't believe it, given how quote unquote remedial those exercises were, light tier and deep tier. Like they're really, really easy, but the benefits aren't really seen for so long. Khrys, you had a good point about how long it took for you to see genuine improvements too.
Yeah, I think it's like, as well, like what Angus was saying, with the ping tier stuff, it was really abrasive. I remember the first time, like Matt kind of, we're still trying to get this weightlifters like Plyos program to like give to people, right? But the first week where I had ping tier stuff, I literally, it is the highest I've ever managed to like jump, like with like an approach, like a single leg approach done for a hop. And genuinely, I thought my calves were going to rip off. Like I woke up the next day and I was like, oh no, I've done something wrong, because like my central nervous system was wrecked, and my calves and my Achilles, like I actually had proper soreness, which I never get. But I got the benefit out of being able to actually like ping off the floor from doing extensive jumps, where I just do like a couple of rounds of 20 of like pogos or like leaps and split stance leaps. Like most people are so terrible at actually contracting, relaxing, creating some kind of momentum. The light tier stuff is probably enough, and then doing the mid tier or probably the deep tier stuff, like combining extensive light tier volume, extensive deep tier volume, and some hard jumping where it's just multiple impulses enough. So like doing leap, split leaps, maybe some hops with a hand support if they're like really, really not good, and then doing some like deep tier stuff where you just jump and do split switch leaps, and then you just get them to do like triple broad jumps or repeat vertical jumps. You'll probably be able to get away with doing variations on that for like 2-3 months. And then all of a sudden you'll see them when they move in their lifts, when they sprint, or when they, let's say like a mate says, do you want to see how high of a box we can jump on? You'll see the results from not actually having to go that maximal, because most people can't do maximal very well. Like, whereas with a back squat or a snatch or clean and jerk, most of the people I get to coach, like they can do that fine. They can already max out those movements. It's about everything you do outside of that to build the qualities. And when your quality of relaxing when you produce force is so terrible, you don't need ping tier for a while, in my opinion. I know Matt would want people to progress to it, but if you're not running and you're not jumping, especially on hard floor, I think you get away with that ping. Like I even think that for like rugby players, for example, where you spend half your time in England running around in sloshy shit grass that's not reactive, you probably don't need as much ping tier. You probably need more deep tier stuff, because that's basically what every one of your foot contacts is going to be. It's going to be a deep, hard foot contact with your foot sliding about.
And then even just, the powerlifters are always struggling to make depth. Just get them to spend more time in that bottom position. Like apart from like a maximal pause squat where they're doing a good morning and leaning forward, I feel like just allowing them to flex their spine, get a bit of length through their abs, like not bracing, not wearing the belt. I think there's so much value to that other side of that like stiffness equation where you are trying to relax down the bottom and find some length. That can be so useful.
Strength coaches as well are always just jerking it to like, how much can I load this person? It's like, you want to put some load through a tissue, get them to hit the ground at speed.
Yeah, even so, then when we're trying to integrate this and I know we touched on like how we can blend it in, but Khrys, you're really good at like just playing with it and making it like making like a game, trying to gamify it as much as you can. But even the whole process of creating these warm-ups can be so much fun and just make you enjoy your job more. And I feel like that's another thing where there's a lot of untapped potential for coaches in if it looks like I know this ties in well to the sales as well, but if it looks like your athletes enjoy what they're doing more so than the progress they're actually making, and if you look like you're having fun, like how many posts have I seen where people are like, this is a chest supported row. In a chest supported row, it's like, fucking hell, man. How about having fun with it? So I think the Plyos where you're like doing it like 2 hops, 1 bound, or like you're using a med ball, or you're doing some kind of weird complex, and you integrate the throws as well, which I'm a bit nervous to do in my in my factory. But yeah, that makes it such a fun and enjoyable process for you, and I think that's just makes you enjoy your job more as a coach. And I think, do you want to touch on that, how that process kind of goes for you?
I think Will posted something about it, and if anyone doesn't know, Will is the person who's like gotten us all together and then just been really elusive and not got on the call with us, which is quite funny. But basically he posted something about basically just put a timer on and just mess around with it. So what will usually end up happening is, the way that I end up coming up with stuff is Matt will usually show me something or just mention something, being like, oh, like you can do this with painted stuff. Oh, this might be interesting for weightlifting, like this split position or whatever. And then I'll mess around with it, and I'll usually just try to find as many different variations as I can. So if I'm interested in change direction stuff, it might be what different variations on like just a skater bound or a slalom bound can you do to be able to get into deeper ranges of motion, to be able to bias more of your hip or bias more of your quad, or to lock up your spine. So you have to use more of your hip and leg to be able to jump. And part of it for me is just, it's probably like 20, 30 minutes longer than I should do it, of just trying to find different variations and see what it feels like. Then when it comes to programming, it's like, that's when the more structured stuff will come in. So if I've spent an hour frying myself with stuff that Matt suggested, where it's like using like a medicine ball and doing the swipe, or like that punching motion he does with the med ball, but just doing front foot elevated split jumps and either trying to take them laterally or doing low ceiling ones into like a knee high jump or whatever. Or then just look at, well, how can you make that into a progression for someone? Like the classic one is, I have lots of people who are shaped like me. So a lot of people wear like, they're built like little boxes, they're little squares. So they struggle with internal rotation of the hips and relaxing their spine. So what are 2 things you can do to get more internal rotation? Elevate your front foot to make it easier to achieve it and take some weight out the front leg. It will make you sit back into your hip. And then what's the other thing you can do? Get a medicine ball or a weight and just reach for your front foot, because then immediately it makes you slump over. So you get more of a reach to that front leg. And then you can either have them hold the ball over that foot and just hop up and down, low ceiling, and then do a high jump. So they get to learn what relaxation, spine flexing is like, and then jump. And then you can progress that into unloaded, or you can progress it into band accelerated, or you can progress it into not just same side, but a switch, or you can progress it into split lunge jumps forwards with the reach towards the floor. Like you can do it that way. You can make a whole progression in a warm-up off of, I just want to get better split jumping. So you could even go split stance, the split stance pogo, so like little kickstand pogo or leap. You just go from that, standing still, then do it multi-directional, like a forwards and backwards, like slalom and pendulum, then just do the same thing, but in a deep split. Because you've progressed it, you've gotten light tier, you've gotten the single-sided stuff, and you've done multi-directional, then you've gone down to deep tier. Then if you want to do a max effort one, you can just do something like a split, just like a jump lunge with the medicine ball held out in front, just trying to get as much high as you can for 2 or 3 reps. Like you can make it all progress. Like Cian would say, it's like you're trying to look at the whole session as like a big build up into this big thing at the end, where like you're trying to make it all build up. If you look at each of your exercises like that, well, if I just take one movement for a plyo, I can make 5 or 6 different variations on it, but I'm doing the same thing. Like I'm jumping with a split stance, or I'm trying to bound forwards, or I'm trying to jump forwards. You can make it all the same thing, and you can bias it that way. So I usually just have it where there'll be, in our library, there'll be extensive plyos, there'll be change of direction plyo circuits, there'll be low ceiling plyo circuits, then there'll be single leg plyo circuits, and then there'll be extensive. Like, do you know what I mean? So you just create lots of different ones, and it almost doesn't matter. I can almost just look at it and go, I'm just going to pick plyo circuit number 4 for this person, and then get them to do split jumps afterwards, because I just need them to do something extensive, and then in general, and then the actual jump, like the high effort one, will be something that's specific to them. But it doesn't need to be. It sounds bad. It doesn't even need to be that structured. You just need them to hop around with some volume for a bit and get to learn how to handle their own body weight in jumps.
Yeah, sales coaches would fucking hate that. What you just said then doesn't need to be that structured. They just need to hop around. They needs no, I'm joking. No, I'm joking. It doesn't. You just need to accumulate the landings, and that's the most important part. And I think that you'll see how much that random variation of landings and random variation of movement, even with the Olympic lifts, but random variations accelerate that learning process, where if you just gave them the same one, just do 20 pogos again, like just do 3 sets of 20 pogos again, and it's like 4 weeks deep. I feel like the quality of someone who just did some split stance ones and then they came back to it, something that's more of a regression, you're going to see an improvement in movement competency anyway.
100%. It's like how many different ways could you make someone do a snatch if you just give them different cues and different intent? There's loads of ways you can make them do it. So if you just told someone, the main thing I want you to do with all these plyos is I need you to try it and stay relaxed, and I just want you to pick your toes up off the floor as quick as you can. So what Matt always says about don't reach for the floor with your toes. But if you give them lots of different variations to do that in, but their intent's the same, it's like the whole thing about, you practice 1,000 different kicks and then it all becomes one kick. You're doing the same shit. I'm just giving you different tools so you don't get bored. Or you can use a pogo jump and just start to get them to do it in multi directions. You can get them to do it for different intensities, or you can get them to do it with hands on hips. You can get them to do the same thing with different intent bases. And I think with that whole thing of sales coaches hating that, it's like, as an aside, with online coaching, are people actually paying for your programming? Like, is it that advanced? Is that good? Or are people paying because they know you're watching them? Like, they know that I want you to do something. Like, I think this is going to be good for you. I think that you should be doing this style of programming. Because there's some people where there's a group of probably 5 or 10 people that I train with and coach, and we all do a relatively similar program because we end up doing the same competition. So some of our phases run the same, and that makes it more fun for them because they all get to do something the same. They all get to moan about it together in the WhatsApp group, and then they all get to have that same experience. But it's like they care because I think it's a good idea for them, and they've seen me try it. So they know, if Khrys has tried this and he's given it to me, he thinks it's good. And then if they know that I'm giving it to them, even if it's relatively the same for a couple of different people, that's what they care about. Like, no one actually thinks they're getting a program that is 100% unique to everyone else, because that's wishful thinking. It's because they know that you're watching them. Like, everyone who signed up to the GPP program, I guarantee you, if all 4 of us, actually 5 of us, and Will wrote a GPP program, how different are they actually going to be? But it's going to be which one of us does someone really want to be coached by. Like, everyone that Angus coaches, almost every time we have a seminar and they walk through the door, I can be like, I know which ones have followed Angus, because there's always one bloke who's got on some like leopard print trousers and a mullet and a mustache. Like, do you know what I mean? Someone's going to go with like, I like all of you, but I identify with Angus the most, so I want to do his program and talk to him about it. Do you know what I mean? That's how that's genuinely how I think online programming is. But yeah, that's far away from jumping. Don't go back into sales, because we'll be here forever.
I was just about to nosedive us back into that fucking swamp. I think individualization is like a big thing as well, that became a marketing tool more so than something that we're actually using to benefit athletes. And I'm not saying just like give everyone the same cookie cutter shit, but like some coaches double down on individualization so much. It's like, are you really telling me you throw the rule book out every single new client you're faced with? Because that's essentially what you're saying, if everything is individualized to that degree. And it's like, I don't think any coaches are realistically doing that, but I think we just need to have a bit more of an explicit conversation. It's just like, how different do you train the person to person? I know it's like just individual preferences influence it a bit, but there's also so many contexts where I would deliberately forego individualization for other things. And again, this usually feeds into the psychosocial side of things more so than the biological side of the physiological side of things. But like, I'll combine an athlete's program to get them competing against each other. Or not, like I said, if I want them to deload, I definitely wouldn't do that. I'd individualize the fuck out of it, get them on separate corners of the gym. But again, if I want output, fuck the individualization, put them together. And when I look at training systems around the world, especially like cohort-based training systems that produce crazy results, it is by, to an extent, sacrificing individualization to the point where everyone can still complete the workouts, but then again, just getting people competing against each other. That's like a real secret sauce. And again, it just it really confirmed to me that we oversold the benefits of individualization. Grant Fowler, someone who I've had many conversations with about this particular topic as well, he has made the point, he's like, if you got an NFL linebacker and you got a soccer player and they swapped S&C programs, would they turn into each other? No, not really. It's just like the body will kind of take from the program what it needs because it's going to be more sensitive to those things anyway. That's sort of the way I look at it. And again, not that I'm just doing the same thing with everyone, but it's like, it's more similar than different. And again, where the individualization is in our relationship together of yada, yada, yada.
The Italian weightlifting team, I think, have the same overall program, and then it's just tweaked a little bit person to person. I saw an interview with Nino on YouTube before the Euros, and he's saying, "Oh yeah, we all have the same program, but it's just a small bit extra or a small bit less depending on the person."
Yeah, that's, I think one of my friends, Christian, went over there and he confirmed the same thing. He said they'll choose different accessory work and whatnot, but it is largely the same. I think if you grow up in a system, especially if the system suits your culture and you're in a team that's good, then you're going to kind of grow into adapting to that program. I think true individualization matters more if someone's training by themselves in a pure gym or a gym box or an anytime gym where they don't see anyone else. So the relationship with you is important and the individualization is genuinely important to keep them entertained. But like one of my friends, Joe, runs a gym up in Stoke. And one of the things he does on Friday is every Friday you can do quids in Big Friday. So if someone says, "Oh, I want to try and PB my power clean today," someone will go put a quid on it. And you can't bet more than a quid. But if anyone wants to join, you all put a quid in a chalk bowl, and then it's basically who gets the closest to their PB or who beats it. But half of you probably didn't have power cleans, but now everyone's going, "Well, no, quid's in. Let's see who can beat it." And you end up getting a lot of people PB because everyone's going, "Now quid's in. Let's do it." Because you're always ready for it. Because you're like, as soon as someone says quid's in, I'm gonna fucking jump off program and go for it. Do you know what I mean? So it gets you into that mindset. And I think even with like I've heard the same thing here about like the not North Korean teams, because no one knows anything about what they do. The South Korean team, where the program is relatively similar, but then they're allowed to individualize after a while. Like that whole, what's the whole thing? What's the approach? The Japanese thing, Shahari, where you learn it a very strict way. Then when you start to get into the intermediate advanced phase, they go, "No, go off and do what you need to do to figure it out," and then you end up coming back to the traditional way anyway. Because you're like, "I figured out everything I need to make this work, so now it doesn't matter anymore."
I think North Korea definitely do the same program, Chris. I think you were right there.
I mean, 100%. I think South Korea do, but obviously they allow you to visualize. North Korea, they have the same pair of Asics to go around the whole team.
Yeah, I'm sure North Korea, of all places, where they really respect the sovereignty and power of the individual. Hey, known for that.
Fucking hell. Does anyone have anything else to add to that? I think that worked out pretty well. North Korea. If I made that comment, I knew it would fuck the whole rhythm of the conversation up. But I just wanted to do that so bad. What about some metrics? So there's a few things that are, I don't know if it's gaining traction, and I don't know if it distracts coaches from actually being good at the craft of coaching, but velocity-based training, that's something that is I find as a interesting kind of, I wonder if it's like a marketing tool. I hope it isn't, but people using it incorrectly, or people using it as another means to justify whether someone's progressing, or using it as a tool for fatigue management or load management. What do you guys sit with velocity-based training? What's your take on it?
I just see I preemptively unmuted myself there. I'm ready to fucking go.
It's RPE with more steps. It's RPE with more steps.
Here's the thing. Oh, go. You go. No, I can wait.
I was just going to say, go on.
Yeah, like Angus will probably say something similar, but it is literally RP with more steps. Like I think I see throwers like who's the American dude? Is it Brian Krauser? I think that's the guy. Like him and his wife train together, and it's like the most like nerve-wracking thing watching. I spot him when he's trying to speed squat like 350. But like for guys like that, where like you can't grind squats, I kind of get why you might throw that on there, because you're always going to Joe Kovacs. That's it. Thank you. Like you're always going to be tempted to go a little bit heavier. But when you look at a lot of shot putters, or even like the Vardanians, so Norik Stad Uric, he was like, "Oh yeah, I just don't grind squats. I keep the volume the same. If it's not moving well that day, I'll drop back down and do some more volume," because he's like, it needs to move fast. So it's like, so we're obviously looking to develop a specific quality to reduce fatigue, get better reps in, and get a certain speed of acceleration in. But it's like the velocity measure is good just to see how fast you're moving. But one of my mates, Rob, messed around with it. He said, like, after a while, you learn to almost like look at the device, and you can already tell to them what speed they're moving at, or if it's speed work or not. So he's like, you'll be able to say when a squat's under 0.7 or when it's under 0.5 or when it's 0.3 or when they need to lock it down for the day. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like for science, it's maybe okay. For someone who literally cannot, yeah, exactly, use your eyes. Like, if for someone who like can't be trusted to use RPE, like as in they can't be, they will overshoot it every time or they'll undershoot it. I get it to maybe recalibrate them a little bit, but do you need to pay do you need to pay that much to use that device if you just want to train and have fun? Like for one of us, maybe to use it just to see what happens would be cool because we'll be able to use the data a bit better. But if you're literally just training and your coach doesn't use it, or you don't have a coach, why do you need it? Like, get it if you want, but I don't think it's going to turn you from being, you know, a 120 snatcher to like a 170 snatcher. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's going to do that.
When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Something along those lines. I bought a jump mat just to figure out how to cheat it better. I was disgusted that I took one session. Like I got a 42-inch vert, and I was like, I don't have a 42-inch vert. All these dickheads on Twitter are like, oh, look at all my high school girls with their 40-inch verts. I'm like, oh my God.
I just feel like with where a lot of the thought is heading in our field as far as program design and load management, that VBT is a step backwards. I thought we were sort of like, oh, dynamic systems theory, oh, data isn't everything. Oh, let me precisely measure down to like the centimeter how fast this fucking bar is moving. I just don't think it's that necessary. Because again, people like, but what if you prescribed a 7 and you don't hit a 7? One, unless you're like completely fucked it, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Also, again, a lot of the people in this crowd that's somehow become infatuated with VBT, they're the ones that talk about the psychological aspects of load management, the psychological aspects of how you perceive a stress is going to have a meaningful impact on how your system processes that stress and adapts to that stress, because we are allostatic predictive systems at the end of the day. Where I'm going with this, if my client hits something, then they're like, that felt like a fucking 9. And I'm like, oh, probably more like, you know, like a hard 8 to me. It's like how their perception of the lift is meaningful, right? Like their perception of the stress that they literally just applied to themselves before my very eyes. Like that's important to me. I'm not going to consult a fucking machine for it. I think where I see value in VBT is not in the data, in the psychosocial aspect of it. Sorry, psychological aspect of it. Powerlifters and people who are infatuated with the weight room, they love trinkets and toys to play around with. This is why people get really good results with like conjugate West Side barbell style training, because your training turns into a science experiment. Like you talk to a West Side aficionado and they're so G'd up. They're like, oh man, I'm going to add like precisely this amount of band tension and it's to overcome like this one particular aspect of my lift. I'm like, man, like whether or not the theory behind that is sound, just like that level of intent with your training and just buying into your own thoughts and beliefs around it, like that sort of thing. And I think that that's a thing for the VBT people as well. They're just like, oh man, like, you know, I get to know exactly how fast this thing's moving. I get all this extra data to sift through. It's a process, unpacking your little box. People are like, oh, what's that? And you're like, oh, it's my VBT thing. Have you heard about VBT? I think that's a huge aspect of it for people. And I also think as well, like any deviation from your technique, then you kind of got to, anytime you want to make technical adjustments to any of your lifts, which a lot of people play around with, again, you've got to throw out all your old lifting data. I'm like, where's the huge upside for it? And again, like I said, if it's just something you enjoy, by all means, but I don't think there's a huge benefit to VBT. And I don't think this applies that much to VBT at this level because it's genuinely not that popular yet. But if VBT hypothetically did become the industry standard, because you got fucking Alico putting VBT units in barbells now, so like maybe we're looking at staring down the barrel or something like this. One of the things I like about RPE, especially when it's used well, especially by an athlete who has buy into the process, is it gets people cognitively engaged with their training in a similar sort of way. But I feel like just with the VBT thing, it's like, well, let me just take my brain and throw it in the bin for this session and not think for myself and just go off the machine. Whereas like I like the opposite. I'm like, no, like, how did that feel to you? And like, are you engaged? Are you ready for this set? And like, how do you feel about it? And just sort of operate like that.
I think it can be useful to kind of going off on a bit of a tangent with some of that conjugate stuff. around speed work as well. If we look at failed lifts, and then if we look at what happens with a lot of people's trainings when they get close to a PR, because as the loads continue to rise, the speed continues to decrease. So that's just missing from their program, moving faster. We spoke about Plyos earlier. They can help as well. But I found bands to be really, really beneficial for moving fast, and moving faster than you can move naturally, because gravity is a constant and you can only move so fast too. So if you're failing at your sticking point, and we think it's because we're arriving at that sticking point without enough speed, maybe the answer is to work on speed, but I don't think you need VBT for that, because there's too many things going on as well. Like, if we're using bands, for example, we're going to talk about the average velocity, which will include the eccentric and concentric. What if that eccentric is super fast because of the band tension, but because of that band tension then coming out of the bottom, it's evened out because it's so difficult to overcome that band tension on the way up, and because you're dealing with such an overload of speed. That was a bit kind of all over the place, I know.
Also, and this is a genuine question, how reliable is velocity loss as a proxy, a measure of proximity to failure? Like, I know generally, but it's like, is this like the EMG to hypertrophy?
Imagine like terminating your set because you misgrooved one bench and be like, nah, that's it.
That's
I'm
what's
done.
happening.
Yeah, I'm done. 10% cut. I think I'm going to start my back offs now, and I'm going to do them until until that's it. Like, I have like a slight drop off. But imagine telling that to Hayden Bowie, who has like the slowest lift I've ever seen on a deadlift, and then he grinds out another 10 more deads and be like, nah, man, sorry, didn't meet the threshold. Step off the IPF carpet, and that's it.
When I interviewed Mike Teixeira, that was what he was saying about his deadlift. Like, there is no relationship between like the speed of his deadlifts and then the RPE.
Yeah, if
like,
you look
at
like,
he should be, he's close to failure, does another 10 reps.
If you look at like the Mladen Janovic had a thing on his complementary training, it was like exertion and velocity, and it was like pretty steady, and then it slowly drops off. Like, you'd be surprised how long you can maintain a high level of like fairly consistent velocity, and then it starts to drop off, and then there's like another step, and then there's another step down. So it's just to be like you're going into this slight drop off, but you don't realize in this state where you've decided to terminate your sets, you still have quite a lot of capacity in that area anyway. So I think it's not really solving a problem for people like they think it is.
Like, if proximity to failure is actually what we're trying to target here, and then it's like you have this assumption that there's like a certain amount of velocity loss that you can tolerate while still making a lift. Are you really telling me that that's not a floating value? Like, are you really capable of the same grind day in, day out? And this is what VBT flies in the face of. And again, I don't see VBT as this huge threat to the system, but I'm like, is it really enhancing it that much? Because I know I'm not capable of completing lifts at the same level of grind every single day. That is very much a floating value for me. And again, up here, it just solves all the problems. It's like, how'd it feel?
Mm.
And if
I think
speed
as long as you have stuff,
what you're shit.
You go on, kid. You go on.
Sorry, if speed is something that you are trying to target and it is important, you can nearly always move fast at that speed or faster. It just requires you to use a different load or a different strategy. Maybe you accelerate it using a band. Maybe you do a drop catch. I don't know. Like, there's always a way to move fast if that is an important floating metric for you to track or whatever.
Yeah, and I think the West Side stuff makes a big difference on that, because if you have a day where it's like you just got to take your lift today and move this weight as fast as you can, then your intent's going to be different to if it's just you need to go as heavy as possible. And like, I know that not strong not strong, because there's two stronger by sciences. There's Greg Knuckles one. That's the one I mean, because I still get his newsletters. And one of the things that he always looks at, he looks over like loads of like meta-analysis and stuff, and like basically goes, here's what this means for plain speak if you literally don't want to read the study. And the most recent one he's put together is how good are people at selecting loads. And he was like, it literally doesn't matter how advanced you get. Almost everyone picks weights that are too light. So if you're looking at speed, yeah, you want to err on the side of lighter probably, so you can move it faster. Like Cian said, you can never move. You're never probably moving at the fastest you could move. You can always move faster. But when it comes to like how heavy you can actually go, having some little calibrators in there, like, okay, just go on a leg press, 200, how many can do it for 10? Okay, actually see if it's actually 10. Go until you can't move it anymore. Because some people will be like, oh, that's an RPE 7 or an 8. Or they'll think they can't move a weight any faster, but then you'll tell them you need to move this as fast as possible, and you find out they can move it faster. Even the VBT can be a lie, because it's like, are you actually putting enough effort in? Are you actually putting enough intent in place? Are you actually trying to move this weight as fast as you can, or are you just moving it? Like, there's the amount of weightlifters I've met where when you ask them, are you actually pushing through the floor when you squat? Are you trying to drive your feet through the floor? And they go, oh, no, not really. It's just like, well, what are you doing then? And then you watch them do it, and then they get faster. So it's like the VBT doesn't measure an absolute, like Angus is saying, an absolute objective value. It measures what you're doing, which is always different based on what your intent is, if you're focusing, what day you're on. And I think that it's easier and cheaper just to actually go to almost failure on an RDL, or actually go to almost failure on a dumbbell bench, or actually go to failure on split squats, or actually go to failure on ISOs. Like, actually go to the point where you can't get up. Because then you actually learn, oh, that's what hard is. Because most people I meet, especially weightlifters, where you're always obsessed with my technique broke down, or I moved a bit slow there, or I didn't quite lock that out very well. The weightlifters I have who are psychopaths, who can actually make a lot of progress, even for advanced people, they will literally lift until they almost drop the bar on their head, or until the reps are very ugly, and you think they've got no business standing the weight up, because they know what an actual RPE 10 or an actual max or an actual 0.255575 on the velocity device is. Whereas the people who are too concerned with technique, who really want to get it right, you got to find ways to get that governor off of them. And a VBT device isn't going to help. Because as soon as they start to slow down, they go, well, that's time to shut up for the day. Can't go any faster. Better stop, because my magical device, the little box, said no. And it's not to say it's not useful. It's just you need to know how it's going to affect each person. Like for the guys who go too hard all the time, the VBT would limit them so they don't toast themselves all the time. But for the people who are a bit in their own heads, it might not be the best tool, in my opinion. But they're going to be the ones who want to use it, because they
It's
want
a
something
whoop
else to tell
strap
them
for
what
your
to do.
barbell.
Literally, a very expensive whoop strap for the bar.
And if we're talking about proximity to failure, I'm actually going to use some sports science, but Helms, I think, did a study where he put people to actual failure and asked them when they thought they were at failure, but they had to keep going, and they did like 10 more reps, or I can't remember what it actually was. But some Russian guy I found on YouTube when I was looking for bench press videos did 601 reps in one set with his body weight. It took him 50 fucking minutes. Like, you're telling me that you went to failure? No, you fucking didn't. And how long are you taking in between reps as well? Like, that's going to be highly individual. You know, those people who do a clean and jerk, for example, and you could read a book by the time they actually go for the jerk. Like, it's so individual that I think it's just superfluous to steal Angus's
term.
Fucking tweet on it or something.
We did recently like a 3x3 back squat and then AMRAP last set, and it was like RPE 8 for everybody. And I was talking to some clients after, and they were saying, I was like, how many reps did you get? You know, you get about like 5, 6, and they're like, oh, 17. I got 18. And the form was pretty fine. Like, they weren't really that spinal. The back squats are pretty good. So I think there's a ton of value in like discussing, why did you get 18? Like, what is going on there? Like, maybe your perception of what an 8 is needs to change, or for that day anyway. There's so much value in that stuff.
I'm just thinking about the glorious tweet I'm going to make as soon as we get off this call about whoop straps and VBT. Fanning myself.
I'm pretty happy with that, boys. Are you guys happy with that?
That was fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Easy.
Yeah, that was good.
Thanks so much for listening. If you did enjoy it, feel free to share it on your socials. I hope you could take something away from this episode. Be sure to follow the podcast on your platform of choice and check out my Instagram to stay up to date on future podcast guests and more S&C content. I'll see you guys in the next episode.